Welcome back. You're watching 101. We're speaking with Andre Morgan, legendary film producer, works in China and in America. We were talking about how you ended up in China, or at least in Hong Kong, and ended up on your second day apparently meeting Bruce Lee.
That's right. He walked into the office and he looked and he said, "What are you doing here? Are you an American?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "So am I." And it was literally, we're the only two Americans in the company. We went out and we had a cup of coffee. It was quite, I look back on it now, and if somebody said this is how you'll get in the film business, you'd say, come on, this is a bad Hollywood script. But it was the beginning of a very serendipitous relationship with Hong Kong and the film industry. And we became friends. And as we say, the rest is history.
Well, Raymond Chow, of course, started Golden Harvest just a few months before that, and you got involved with that. You started out at 20 as an office boy, and then by the time, well, a dozen years later, by the time you were leaving Hong Kong, you were running the biggest division in the biggest film company.
It's called one of those miraculous rises to power and authority. I failed up so quickly, it was mind-boggling. I joined the company on a Monday, and he said, well, you read and write Chinese, why don't you do the English subtitles? And so the day Bruce Lee walked in, I was sitting there translating subtitles for a movie from Chinese into English. And about 3 days later, Raymond said to me, listen, we've got this buyer coming in from Venezuela. I want you to come to the lunch. Oh, that's very nice, a free lunch. Office boy getting a lunch, how bad is it? And he says, if they ask you what you do, say you're the assistant manager in charge of sales. I said, okay. I went to the lunch. I meet this distributor from Venezuela. Raymond Chow says, this is our assistant manager in charge of sales. He'll be handling this. The Venezuelans were thrilled. We go back after lunch, and Raymond says, you need to get some cards printed up that say you're an assistant manager. So I tell the secretary, I need some cards. I get the cards, and I said, Raymond, can I ask you a question? If I'm the assistant manager, who's the manager? He said, we don't have one. I said, who else is in the foreign department? He says, you are the foreign department. And so I went from being the office boy to being the assistant manager. And about a week later, about 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, Bruce Lee came back from shooting part of a movie that we now call Return of the Dragon with Chuck Norris in Rome. And I'm sitting in the office, and I'm now an assistant manager in charge of sales, and I'm the office boy that does the subtitles. And Raymond says, listen, I want you to go to the studios tomorrow. We're putting you on the movie as an assistant producer. I said, okay. What am I supposed to do? He said, keep Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris happy. So I said, do I need a card? He said, no, you don't need a card. Just don't come to the office tomorrow. Go out to the studio. Get up in the morning, I take a taxi, I drive out to the studio, I go on the set, and I say to Bruce, I'm here, I'm the assistant producer. He looked at me and said, what are you supposed to do? I said, I'm supposed to keep you and Chuck happy. I spent the next 2 weeks hanging out with Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee, watching as they were making Return of the Dragon. Long story short, we finish, I say goodbye to Chuck Norris, he goes back to America. I'm having a meeting with Raymond. He said, you know, you did very well. We're going to put you on another film. I said, what am I going to do? He said, oh, we haven't decided yet, but you should get some cards made up that say you're an assistant producer. So literally between June and September, I went from being the office boy who does subtitles to being the assistant manager in a one-man department for international sales to being an assistant producer going on to his second movie. And these discussions were going on in how to sell the Bruce Lee movies and what could we do with these early movies. Well, we should dub them into English. And so, as was the case, Raymond said, right, go and get them dubbed. Get them dubbed? I can't do all the voices myself. I'm the office boy, I'm the assistant manager. He said, well, there have to be people around that dub movies, just go hire some. So we literally went out and we set up a dubbing company to dub the Bruce Lee movies. We get the movies dubbed, and now we've got to take them off to market them. And so now we're trying to figure out how are we going to sell these movies, and where do we go to sell them? And checking around, oh, they're going to have film festivals in Milan, in Cannes, and you can always go to Hollywood and sell a movie. So I went from being the assistant manager in the foreign sales department to being the sales manager and the only person in the foreign sales department. But I was also now a producer in the Chinese production department. And we got an offer to do a co-production with Warner Brothers. And so Raymond's right, you're coming with me. So we're going to make the deal on a co-production. Anybody asks, you're the producer. The producer. He says, you've done 2 movies. So the next thing I know, I'm now working on Enter the Dragon as the official producer from the Chinese side of the co-production with Warner Brothers. I'm not representing Warner Brothers, I'm representing Golden Harvest and the Chinese side, and I'm sitting opposite this 50-year-old seasoned Hollywood producer, and he's looking at me and going, how'd you get to be a producer? I say, it's a long story, Fred, don't ask. It's very complicated in Hong Kong.
And you actually were promoting, I mean, really essentially bringing Kung Fu, and you brought Bruce Lee to the to Western audience. How was that initial reaction? Again, as you say, it was an interesting time because the idea of taking a Chinese movie into America.
You know what? I look on it now. Sometimes you have to say it's better that you don't know too much, because truly ignorance can be bliss, and you'll try to accomplish the impossible. On the other hand, I think the world was a lot simpler in those days. We took the films, we went to Hollywood, knocked on the door, showed them to a few distributors, and they looked at us and said, why would anybody want to see this nonsense? What is this kung fu stuff? Haven't you ever seen a fight? You know, when John Wayne throws a punch, it's a good, solid punch. I mean, you can have people jumping up in the air and kicking people in the head and making these funny noises. That was at the end of the summer of 1972. By the spring of 1973, we had made a deal with a small company in America, and the first of the Bruce Lee movies had opened. And it did phenomenal business. It did $1 million in the first weekend. Granted, in bad theaters and drive-in theaters, but numbers that people had to pay attention to. And by then, we were already distributing the movies in Europe. By the time Enter the Dragon opened in the summer, late summer of 1973, Bruce Lee had become a cult figure because he had died so suddenly. That's 1973. I look today, whether it's in 2005, 6, or 7, there's not a movie being made in Hollywood today that has an action sequence in it that does not incorporate some sort of martial arts moves, whether it's kung fu or karate or aikido or jiu-jitsu or some other version. Gone are the days of the good old-fashioned roundhouse kick or a roundhouse punch. It's all martial arts today. And young actors in Hollywood don't realize it hasn't always been that way. So I would say we had an impact.
And of course, you know, hits like the Cannonball Run, they were quite different at the time. You had all the outtakes and the characters. You brought Jackie Chan into the Western film world there.
That was Jackie's introductory, as we say, test run. We wanted to give him an opportunity to see how it was to work in Hollywood and be surrounded by bigger stars, bigger celebrities on a major Hollywood production, and also to get him used to the idea of acting with Americans in an environment where English was going to be the first language. And we also wanted to do a bit of a teaser to introduce Jackie Chan to the Western audiences. You know.
Andre, how would you like to be remembered? What would you like your legacy to be?
It sounds funny to say. I hope my legacy will be I gave back more than I took from the industry. I've been very, very fortunate. I've had an incredible run, both in Asia and in Hollywood. And hopefully I've been able to help some other people along the way to achieve their dreams or their aspirations. And it would kind of be nice to think that it wasn't just about the money I made or the awards that I won, but that actually it helped some people to get on with realizing their dreams and hopefully bridging gaps between cultures.
And you collected some good business cards on the way.
A lot of business cards and a lot of great stories.
Andre, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Riz.